I learned about my Aunt Sheila's retirement gala from an Instagram story I was never supposed to see. I was sitting at my kitchen counter when a notification appeared from one of my cousin Jenna's friends. The video opened on a ballroom, glowing with warm lights, white tablecloths, flower arrangements, a jazz trio, and dozens of people applauding while Sheila stood near the stage in tears. Then I saw my mother near the front, Uncle Rick raising a glass, Jenna laughing beside him, and a caption across the screen. "When the clown pays and the circus eats." My name is Hannah Cole, and apparently I was the clown. 7 days earlier, I had opened a new credit line because the transmission in my car had died on the freeway. I needed the car for work, so I had already planned a month of cheap groceries and canceled weekends. Then Rick called. He said the family was organizing a surprise celebration for Sheila after 38 years in education. Everyone had supposedly contributed, but they were short on the last deposits: venue, food, flowers, musicians. He told me I was the dependable one, the person who did not chase attention but always came through. I warned him that the money I had available was borrowed from my car. Somehow, he turned that into a reason I was perfect for the job. The next morning, I transferred $4,800 and even told him they did not need to repay me. For the entire week, nobody mentioned the gala again. I assumed the silence was about keeping Sheila surprised. Watching that Instagram story, I realized there had been a guest list: speeches, photographers, and a complete family plan. I simply had not been included. I called Rick. He answered too quickly. When I asked why I had not been invited, he said I hated big events anyway. Then he praised my generous spirit and told me everyone appreciated what I had done. I hung up before he could make exclusion sound like a compliment. I did not scream or call my mother. I opened my banking app and froze the card. Then I disputed every charge tied to the gala weekend: venue, catering, flowers, music. The payments were traceable, and I had messages showing Rick had misrepresented what I was funding. At 4:17 p.m., I emailed the venue manager with documentation and withdrew authorization for charges made under false pretenses. I expected paperwork and delays. Instead, the consequences arrived before dinner. By 6 o'clock, the ballroom was closed to the family. The musicians left. Staff cleared what they could. The celebration spilled into the parking lot, with guests still wearing dresses and suits. Someone later sent me a photo of Sheila on a folding chair with a paper plate, while Rick argued with a vendor. Part of me felt cruel. Another part remembered the caption about the clown. I turned off my phone. If they wanted me absent, I could be absent all the way. For almost 2 days, nobody contacted me. That silence told me they were not deciding how to apologize. They were deciding how to explain the disaster without admitting what they had done. On Tuesday, Jenna called and said there had been confusion. Rick apparently believed I had disputed the charges accidentally, and maybe I could fix things with the bank. I told her there had been no accident. She reminded me that I had always disliked parties, as if my personality somehow transferred ownership of my money to them. I told her Rick could speak for himself. He called that afternoon. First, he said they had never meant to exclude me. Then he said the guest list had simply come together without me. Then he reminded me that I had called the $4,800 a gift. I let him talk until he ran out of excuses. Then I told him I had removed my money from an event whose organizers treated me as both financier and punchline. They had exercised their freedom to leave me out. I had exercised mine to stop paying. Rick tried saying I had still been an important part of Sheila's night, even if I was not physically there. So I repeated the Instagram caption back to him. He went silent and ended the call. After that, messages arrived from relatives I had not spoken to in years. Some claimed they were checking on me. Others offered vague apologies that never named what they had done. Sheila herself wrote that she had not noticed I was missing until later in the evening and thanked me for helping make the celebration possible. Then a photo appeared in the extended family chat. Several relatives sitting in a driveway with plastic cups, pretending the night had not collapsed. Nobody mentioned why it had. On Friday, my bank confirmed the reversals. My balance was restored. The vendors, however, still expected to be paid, and for the first time the card attached to that problem was not mine. That was when my mother called. She told me I had made my point and needed to let the family move on. She said everyone knew I preferred quiet evenings and small gatherings, so I was taking the exclusion too personally. I asked whether she would say the same thing if someone used her emergency money to host a party, left her out, and joked about her while spending it. She had no answer. That night, Rick emailed a formal apology filled with sterile language about misunderstandings and unintended hurt. At the bottom came the real reason. The caterer still wanted payment, and he wondered whether I might contribute just a little. I did not reply. 2 days later, Jenna asked if I could lend her rent money because the gala had left her stretched thin. I stared at the message, almost impressed by the nerve of it, then sent one sentence. "I think you've mistaken me for the clown again." She never answered. For years, my family had mistaken quietness for permission. They knew me as the woman who helped without making people beg, who covered gaps and said, "Don't worry about it," and meant it. They assumed that kind of person could be embarrassed, excluded, then summoned again when the bill arrived. What they had not learned yet was that quiet people do not always explode when they are finished. Sometimes they simply close the door, and mine had only started moving toward the frame. By the 3rd week, the silence stopped feeling peaceful. It became heavy, deliberate, the kind of silence people use while deciding which version of a story will make them look innocent. I had already made my decision. I wasn't planning revenge, wasn't plotting another confrontation, and honestly, wasn't spending much time thinking about them. I went to work, got my car fixed, paid down what remained of the loan, and started enjoying the strange calm that came from no longer being available on command. Apparently that calm bothered them more than anger would have. My cousin Drew sent me an old childhood photo of us sitting in a plastic pool at Grandma's house and wrote, "Back when everything was simple." I left it unread for hours before finally opening it. No reply. The next afternoon, Aunt Sheila called. Her voicemail started sweetly, with memories about birthdays and holidays, then drifted toward the gala. She claimed she had not realized I was missing until after dessert. She said if she had known, she would have thanked me publicly. "You were one of the people who made that night possible," she said. There was something almost impressive about how they kept finding new ways to praise me without apologizing to me. My mother called later that same day. She skipped the sentimental part entirely. "Hannah, what are you doing?" she asked. "You've made your point." I asked what point she thought I had made. She sighed like I was exhausting her. According to her, Rick and Sheila were ready to move forward, and I was the one keeping the family trapped in the past. She reminded me again that I disliked crowded events. She said everyone had assumed I would rather stay home. I asked whether they had also assumed I would enjoy paying for everyone else while they joked about me. That finally stopped her. After a few seconds, she said family members were supposed to forgive mistakes. I told her mistakes were accidental. Sending someone a bill while hiding the guest list required planning. She accused me of turning relatives into enemies. I told her I wasn't turning anyone into anything. I was simply refusing to keep pretending access to me was the same thing as love. The strangest call came from Grandma on Sunday morning. She was usually the family's emergency diplomat, the person sent in when everyone else had failed. She told me Rick was stressed, Jenna was struggling, and Sheila had cried during dinner. Then she said, "You've always been the mature one, Hannah. Don't become someone who holds things over people." I told her I wasn't holding anything over them. I wasn't demanding apologies, money, or explanations. I had simply stopped participating. That answer clearly bothered her more than if I had screamed. She told me I was better than this. I said maybe being better had become another word for being easier to use. She went silent. Before hanging up, she asked me to think about what kind of woman I wanted to become. I did think about it. I wanted to become the kind who could hear disappointment in someone's voice without mistaking it for an obligation. Then Jenna changed tactics. She posted a photo of an almost empty refrigerator on Instagram with a caption about loyalty disappearing when money did. A few hours later came another picture, plain rice in a takeout container with a message about always being there for others and discovering who really cared when she needed help. I ignored both. Then my cousin Erin sent me a screenshot of a comment thread under one of Jenna's posts. Someone had asked what happened. Jenna had replied, "Ask Hannah. She knows who she left hanging." There it was. In their version, nobody had taken my emergency money under false pretenses. Nobody had excluded me. Nobody had laughed. I had simply abandoned people who needed me. It would have been almost funny if I hadn't spent years watching them build stories exactly like that whenever consequences arrived. Rick texted the next morning. He told me they had worked things out with the venue, sold a few belongings, borrowed from friends, and settled the outstanding balance. Then came the line that stayed with me. "Wish you'd stayed part of the team." I read it 3 times. Team. They wanted to make it sound like I had walked away from a shared mission instead of discovering that the team had held a meeting without me and used my wallet as admission. The following day, I received a voicemail from the venue manager. She sounded exhausted, but professional. She confirmed that everything had been resolved and said Rick had asked her to pass along a message. "Tell Hannah she won." The manager sounded confused by it. So was I at first. I had never called this a competition. I had never demanded victory. All I had done was remove my money and refuse to keep being manipulated. Yet somehow, to Rick, boundaries automatically meant a power struggle. That voicemail clarified something I should have understood years earlier. My family respected pressure more than kindness. When I gave without demanding anything, generosity became invisible. When I stayed calm, they assumed I was weak. When I said yes, they treated yes as my natural state. But the first time I said no and made that no expensive, suddenly I was dangerous. Suddenly, I was playing games. Suddenly, they had to negotiate with me, instead of assuming I would surrender. It wasn't that they had finally understood my feelings. They had finally understood consequences. And those were 2 very different things. About 6 weeks after the gala, a cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox. My name was handwritten on the front. Inside was an invitation to a family reconciliation brunch at one of the most expensive restaurants downtown, hosted by Sheila and Rick. "Your presence is requested." I actually laughed standing there in my kitchen. There was no apology inside, no acknowledgement of what happened, just the word reconciliation, as if we were representatives from hostile nations meeting after a border dispute. 2 days later, Rick called from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. He said the brunch was about something bigger than the gala and asked me to call him. The next voicemail explained everything. He and Sheila were considering investing in a small event venue. Apparently, the gala had taught them a lot about the business. He said they wanted to build something as a family and thought I could come in at a partner level, handling logistics and operations. I sat there listening to the message twice because I genuinely couldn't believe the sequence of thought required to arrive at that proposal. 6 weeks earlier, they had used my borrowed money, hidden the event from me, mocked me, then begged me to help cover the damage after I withdrew the funds. Now they wanted me to become financially entangled with them in an event business. The audacity was almost elegant. I waited a day before replying because I wanted my answer to be clean. No emotion they could twist, no argument they could forward around. I sent Rick one sentence. "I don't build businesses with people who already showed me what they do with my trust." He never responded. 3 days later, Jenna posted a photo from the reconciliation brunch. Half the chairs around the table were empty. Her caption complained that some people would rather hold grudges than build something meaningful. What caught my attention wasn't the caption. It was the little heart beneath it from my mother's account. For a few seconds, I considered calling her. Then I realized I already knew what she would say. She would tell me it was just social media. She would say I was reading too much into it. She would somehow turn the conversation into another lecture about forgiveness. So, I did something different. I opened the folder on my phone where I had saved the screenshots from the gala. I added the Instagram stories, Rick's voicemails, the bank dispute confirmation, the venue email, Jenna's posts, Sheila's messages, and the photo of everyone eating in the parking lot. Then I renamed the folder Insurance. A week later, my mother called to tell me Jenna had received an eviction warning. Her roommate had moved out, rent was overdue, and apparently I was once again the logical solution. She only needs help for 1 month, Mom said. Family helps family. I reminded her that Jenna had used almost those exact words after helping Rick spend money borrowed from my car. Mom called me spiteful. I ended the conversation and blocked her number for the rest of the day. Sitting alone afterward, I finally understood what had bothered me most about everything. It wasn't losing $4,800 because I had recovered it. It wasn't even the humiliation. It was that nobody had ever truly apologized. They were sorry the gala collapsed. Sorry the vendors demanded payment. Sorry I stopped answering. Sorry Jenna was struggling. Sorry their business idea lost a convenient partner. But not one of them seemed genuinely sorry for what they had done to me. That night, I started writing the story down from the beginning. Dates, messages, names, receipts, everything. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted one place where nobody could rewrite what happened. For the first time, their version didn't matter. I had proof. And as I looked at that insurance folder growing on my screen, I had the uneasy feeling I would need it sooner than I thought. I thought creating that folder would be the end of it. Not because I trusted my family to suddenly develop self-awareness, but because they had exhausted every obvious angle. Guilt, nostalgia, financial emergencies, grandma's disappointment, fake reconciliation, even a business proposal. There were only so many ways people could ask you to forget what they had done while refusing to say they were sorry. For several days, nobody contacted me. My mother stayed blocked. Rick stopped calling. Jenna's vague social media posts shifted to other subjects. I started thinking maybe they had finally accepted the one thing they had spent 6 weeks refusing to understand. I wasn't waiting for them to make things right anymore. I had moved on without their permission. That should have been the ending. In my family, apparently, it was only intermission. Yesterday afternoon, my cousin Erin texted me. Erin was one of the few relatives who had never tried to lecture me after the gala, which was probably why I opened her message immediately. There was no greeting, just a photograph of a wedding invitation. At first, I assumed she wanted my opinion about the design. Then I read the names, Jenna and Malcolm. I stared at them long enough to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Jenna and Malcolm had been together, broken up, reconciled, broken up again, and repeated that cycle so often that family members stopped asking whether they were dating. Now they were getting married in 2 months. That alone would have been surprising. Then I saw the venue printed beneath their names. It was the same event hall where Sheila's retirement gala had collapsed. I actually laughed. Of every venue in the city, they had chosen the one where my family had ended up eating dinner in a parking lot, because they had tried to finance a celebration with my money while excluding me from it. Maybe they thought returning there would erase the humiliation. Maybe Rick had negotiated some kind of deal after settling the outstanding balance. Or maybe my relatives simply possessed a level of confidence that bordered on delusion. Whatever the explanation, I had no intention of becoming involved. I thanked Erin for sending the picture and put my phone down. Less than an hour later, it buzzed again. Someone had added me to a large group text. I didn't recognize the number that created it. The message announced Jenna and Malcolm's wedding, with enough exclamation marks to make it feel like a marketing campaign. Then came the important part. Instead of traditional gifts, the happy couple would appreciate financial contributions toward making their day extra special. Beneath that were links for Venmo and Cash App. I scrolled upward, wondering whether I had missed an actual invitation. There was no RSVP. No ceremony details sent directly to me. Nobody had asked whether I was attending. I had simply been added to a digital collection plate. For a few seconds, the old version of me surfaced. The woman who would have wondered whether refusing made her selfish. The woman who might have sent $100 just to avoid awkwardness and told herself it wasn't worth creating drama. Then I remembered Sheila's ballroom. I remembered Rick telling me I hated parties anyway. I remember Jenna asking for rent money after calling me the person who left everyone hanging. That version of me disappeared almost as quickly as she appeared. I muted the group chat and returned to what I had been doing. Rick called 30 minutes later. I watched his name appear on the screen and let it ring. His voicemail sounded almost cheerful, which somehow made it worse. He said he hoped I had heard Jenna's exciting news. He talked about new beginnings, family healing, and the importance of putting difficult chapters behind us. According to him, the wedding could become an opportunity for everyone to start fresh. Then, with perfect timing, he explained what starting fresh required from me. Helping Jenna financially, he said, would demonstrate that I had genuinely moved beyond what happened at Sheila's gala. He framed giving them money as proof of my emotional growth. Then he used the line that confirmed absolutely nothing had changed. "You've always been the one who shows up when it counts, Hannah." I replayed that sentence once, not because I hadn't heard it, but because it sounded so familiar. Before Sheila's gala, I was dependable. After the gala collapsed, I was spiteful. When they wanted help with the vendors, I was generous. When I refused, I was holding a grudge. When Rick wanted a business partner, I suddenly had a brilliant mind for logistics. Now Jenna needed wedding money, and once again, I was the person who showed up when it counted. Their opinion of my character changed depending on whether my wallet was open. I didn't call Rick back. I opened the group chat instead. There were already relatives sending heart emojis and congratulatory messages. Someone wrote that they had contributed $50. Another promised to send something after payday. I could have left without saying anything. But after weeks of carefully swallowing every sarcastic thought that crossed my mind, I allowed myself exactly one. I typed, "Let me know if the venue is offering the parking lot menu again." Then I muted the thread. Nobody answered me directly. At least not at first. About 20 minutes later, Erin sent 3 laughing emojis privately, followed immediately by, "I'm staying out of this." I told her that was probably wise. By evening, several people had left the group chat. Jenna posted an inspirational quote about people who refuse to celebrate your happiness because they are committed to misunderstanding you. She didn't use my name. She didn't need to. Months earlier, a post like that might have made me anxious. I would have wondered who believed her, whether relatives were discussing me, whether I should explain my side before their version became permanent. This time, I made dinner and forgot about it. That change might be the most important part of everything that happened. I used to believe having the receipts meant I needed to show them. Now I understood the real value of keeping evidence was knowing I could defend myself if necessary without spending every day defending myself preemptively. My insurance folder remained on my phone. The bank records were still there. So were Rick's voicemails, screenshots of Jenna's posts, emails from the venue, and every message asking me for money after pretending I was the problem. I didn't need to send the folder to the family group chat. I didn't need to expose anyone publicly. The truth did not become less true because I refused to argue about it. That was why I finally wrote everything down. For years, I had been the relative who solved problems quietly, and being useful had disguised how conditional some of those relationships were. The moment I stopped solving their problems, they started treating my boundaries as cruelty. That hurt more than the original $4,800 ever could. Money can come back. Mine did. What doesn't return quite so easily is the version of your family you believed existed before you saw what happened when you said no. As of now, I am not attending Jenna and Malcolm's wedding. I am not contributing to their fund. I am not calling Rick to discuss healing. And I am not asking my mother why she keeps choosing their version of events over mine. If Jenna and Malcolm have a beautiful wedding, I genuinely hope they enjoy it. If Sheila and Rick eventually open their event business, good for them. They can build whatever they want with their own money. That is the distinction they still seem determined not to understand. Maybe they will contact me again. Based on the last several weeks, I would almost bet on it. There may be another emergency, another celebration. Another carefully worded message explaining why refusing to pay for something proves I am bitter. But the next conversation will happen under different rules. I am no longer auditioning for the role of the generous daughter, niece, cousin, or granddaughter who absorbs every insult because keeping the peace is supposedly more important than keeping her dignity. They once joked that the clown paid while the circus ate. They were right about one thing. There had been a performance. I just misunderstood my role in it. I thought I was family. They thought I was funding. Now the card is frozen. The account is mine. The evidence is saved. And the woman they used to summon whenever a bill appeared is gone. I'm not part of their act anymore. I'm just the woman keeping the receipts.